What if you were told that a mere 500 soldiers once stood against an army of 10,000 and against all odds emerged victorious? It sounds impossible, a tale out of legend rather than fact. Yet, such a moment in history did unfold. A battle so utterly unthinkable that it defies conventional logic and rewrites everything we think we know about warfare. This is not just a story of brute strength or overwhelming numbers. It is a testament to strategy, courage, and the power of the human spirit when pushed to its limits. Imagine being outnumbered 20 to 1, surrounded, exhausted, and facing an enemy swelling with confidence and firepower. The odds of survival seem slim to none, and victory unthinkable. Yet, history remembers those 500 men not as the defeated, but as the heroes who achieved the impossible. What was their secret? How did they overcome impossible odds to defeat a force so vastly superior? In the following story, we will dive deep into the heart of that battle, unraveling the tension, the decisions, and the strategies that turned the tide in favor of the underdog. This is not merely a recounting of dates and movements on a map. Instead, it is a journey into the minds of commanders and soldiers alike, the psychology of fear and hope, and the brutal realities of combat. You'll discover how leadership, innovation, and the unyielding will to survive converge to create a momentous victory that continues to inspire generations. But this victory was not without its price. The stakes were incredibly high. The fate of kingdoms, the lives of thousands, and the course of history itself hung in the balance. Every decision mattered. Each move forward could mean survival or annihilation. As we explore the battle, prepare to experience the intense pressure, the split-second choices, and the raw humanity of those involved. This story will challenge your assumptions about military power and strategy. It will force you to reconsider the failure of sheer numbers as the sole determinant of success on the battlefield. And it will leave you pondering the critical role of wisdom, willpower, and sometimes sheer luck. Are you ready to witness the extraordinary? To step back in time and uncover how a small band of determined soldiers defied overwhelming odds and etched their names into the annals of history? This is the unthinkable victory, the moment when 500 men defeated 10,000. Stay with us as we unfold a gripping tale of valor and strategy, where every chapter reveals new layers of complexity and courage. A story that is as much about the human condition as it is about war. In the years leading up to this extraordinary clash, the geopolitical landscape was defined by growing tensions and a precarious balance of power between two vastly different factions. On one side stood a formidable army numbering around 10,000, representing a coalition of well-equipped and confident forces eager to assert their dominance. Their motivations were clear: to expand territory, consolidate power, and demonstrate military supremacy in the region. Buoyed by sheer numbers and resources, this force embodied strength through quantity, yet their size also made coordination and flexibility a challenge. Contrasting sharply with this massive force was a smaller contingent of only 500 soldiers, whose very existence seemed precarious amid the overwhelming odds. These men were often underestimated by their adversaries, seen as little more than a minor obstacle to be swept aside. However, this smaller faction was driven by an unyielding commitment to defend their homeland ideals or strategic position. Their strengths lay not in numbers but in discipline. strategic ingenuity, and intimate knowledge of the terrain advantages that would prove crucial in the days to come. The social climate surrounding the conflict added layers of urgency and complexity. The larger force's confidence often bordered on arrogance, fueled by previous successes and the belief that numerical superiority guaranteed victory. Meanwhile, the smaller group faced internal pressures, loyalty to commanders, the burden of defending family and land, and the awareness that failure would mean annihilation. These stakes elevated every decision to a matter of life and death, infusing the conflict with intense emotional and psychological weight. Within the larger army, command structures were rigid but sometimes strained under the logistical challenge of moving thousands of troops efficiently. The motivation to achieve a swift and decisive victory was palpable, but overconfidence risked overlooking crucial tactical pitfalls. On the other side, the smaller force's leadership embraced innovation and adaptability, crafting strategies that leveraged their agility against the lumbering might of their foes. This stark disparity set the stage for a battle that was as much a test of human will and strategic finesse as it was of military power. The urgency was not abstract, it was palpable in every campfire, every whispered command, every soldier's heartbeat. At stake was more than just territory. It was honor, survival, and the course of a larger conflict that could reshape the political order. As we journey forward into the heart of this battle, understanding this context is essential. It explains why every maneuver mattered, how motivations fueled actions, and why this seemingly impossible confrontation would soon ignite into a defining moment. Prepare to explore a story where sheer numbers were not the final arbiter of fate, but where cunning, courage, and resilience carved a path to an unforgettable victory. In a world dominated by vast armies and overwhelming numbers, the story of 500 men standing defiantly against 10,000 adversaries challenges our very expectations of warfare. These men, often overshadowed by the sheer scale of their opponents, were united by fierce leadership, rigorous training, and an unbreakable spirit. At the helm stood commanders whose experience transcended battlefield tactics. Their leadership was not born of command alone, but forged in the crucible of adversity. They understood that victory would not come from brute force, but from discipline, ingenuity, and an ironclad resolve. Their ability to inspire and maintain morale under such dire conditions became a cornerstone of the small force's strength. The soldiers themselves were no ordinary men. Each was carefully selected and rigorously trained, not just in martial skills, but in resilience and adaptability. Their preparation went beyond physical conditioning. It shaped a mindset prepared to face insurmountable odds with unwavering determination. This training fostered a brotherhood, a bond deeper than mere comradeship, binding them in shared purpose and mutual reliance. Morale within this smaller group was a fragile yet potent flame. Despite knowing their disadvantage in numbers, the men drew strength from their cause, their leaders, and each other. Stories of previous hardships endured and victories won fueled a collective courage. Their resolve was tested repeatedly, but never broken. Moreover, the smaller force possessed unique advantages. Intimate knowledge of the terrain allowed them to choose battlegrounds that neutralized the numerical superiority of their enemies. They expertly utilized natural cover, choke points, and strategic positions to disrupt enemy formations and maximize the effectiveness of each soldier. Their arsenal, while limited compared to the vast stores available to their foes, was wielded with exceptional skill. Every weapon, every move, was calculated within the framework of a larger strategy that valued precision and surprise over overwhelming firepower. While the overwhelming odds painted a grim picture, this disparity underscored the determination and ingenuity of the underdog. Each man became more than a soldier. He became a vital link in a chain, holding together the hopes of a desperate cause. Their story is not just of numbers lost or won, but of human courage and tactical brilliance carving a path through adversity. As we delve deeper into their journey, prepare to see how leadership, training, morale, and tactical acumen combine to create an extraordinary force. These 500 men, dwarfed by their opponents, became giants in their own right, heroes whose courage echoes through history. An army of 10,000 men marches across a battlefield, a force both awe-inspiring and daunting. Under the command of seasoned generals whose reputations command respect, this army represents the might and ambition of a powerful coalition. Their commanders, confident in their overwhelming numbers and robust logistics, envision a swift and decisive victory, their tactics rooted in traditional warfare where massed forces crush opposition through brute strength. These commanders, however, are not infallible. Their mindset is one shaped by routine successes and the belief that quantity outweighs quality. This overconfidence molds their strategy, pushing them towards a direct confrontation that can overlook subtle tactical risks. Their troops, though disciplined and well-equipped, rely on numerical superiority to offset any deficiencies in maneuverability or familiarity with the terrain. Tactically, the larger force favors broad frontal assaults designed to envelope and overwhelm the enemy. Their formations are rigid, optimized for steady advance and firepower. This makes sense given their size, but it also breeds vulnerability, lack of flexibility, and susceptibility to well-executed ambushes or disruptions in supply lines. Communication across the vast ranks requires strict hierarchy and protocol, which can slow responsiveness and adaptability. The army's size becomes a double-edged sword. While it projects strength, it also demands considerable resources and coordination. Logistics strain under the weight of thousands needing supplies, rest, and clear orders. The commander's pressure to maintain morale among such a vast force sometimes pushes aggressive tactics that increase risk. Psychologically, the men of this great army carry the weight of expectation and tradition. Many believe their victory is assured based on historical precedents and the sheer discrepancy in numbers. This mindset can lead to underestimating the resolve and innovativeness of their smaller opponent. These strategic misjudgments and over-reliance on scale will soon be exploited by the smaller, more agile force. The larger army's presence is imposing, but their approach reflects the critical mistake of equating size with superiority without considering the deeper dynamics of the terrain, morale, and tactical innovation elements that will prove decisive in the upcoming battle. At the heart of the unthinkable victory of 500 men against an army of 10,000 was the brilliance of their strategic leadership, mindful, innovative, and deeply attuned to the psychological and physical realities of warfare. This small force did not face their overwhelming opponents with direct confrontation. Instead, they wove a complex tactical plan that turned their apparent weaknesses into strengths. The strategy began with an acute understanding of terrain. The commanders selected a battlefield that inherently favored defense and cunning over brute force. Narrow passes, hills, and natural choke points limited the larger army's ability to deploy its full might. This geographical advantage was critical. It compressed the battlefield, neutralizing what could have been a devastating numerical advantage for the enemy. By funneling the opposing force into confined spaces, the smaller army forced chaotic congestion that disrupted the cohesion and momentum of the larger force. Beyond geography, psychological warfare played an essential role in the plan. The commanders deliberately sowed misinformation and used feints to confuse and destabilize the enemy's decision-making. Rumors about the strength and reinforcements of the smaller army were carefully planted. The demonstrations of false confidence and calculated retreats enticed the larger force into overextending themselves, chasing illusions of an easy victory. This psychological manipulation forced the opposing commanders to second-guess their actions, eroding their composure and resolve. At a tactical level, the smaller army employed innovative maneuvers uncommon among forces of their size and era. Instead of a rigid formation, their troops operated with fluidity and flexibility, adapting quickly to the flow of battle. Ambushes were meticulously planned along likely enemy routes, exploiting the terrain's natural cover. Cavalry units were deployed in rapid strike teams to harass and disrupt supply lines, increasing pressure on the enemy and hampering their organizational capacity. The contrast framing between the two forces, the swelling confidence and cumbersome bulk of 10,000 men versus the nimble, resourceful, and keenly coordinated 500, was central to this plan's success. What the large army saw as a straightforward siege or assault became a nightmare of confusion and attrition. The smaller force capitalized on the psychological edge gained, striking decisively at moments when the larger army's cohesion was at its weakest. Supply lines and morale were also strategic focal points. The commanders anticipated the logistical challenges inherent to a large army and sought to exploit these vulnerabilities by cutting off access to essential resources such as food and water. This attritional strategy was designed to wear down the enemy physically and mentally, turning their strength into a liability over time. One of the most remarkable aspects of the plan was the emphasis on disciplined, almost surgical strikes rather than prolonged engagements. The smaller force avoided exhausting stand-up fights, instead engaging in hit-and-run tactics that preserved their resources and morale while steadily eroding that of the opponent. In essence, this strategy reflected profound military wisdom. Victory does not always belong to the largest army, but to the one that best understands and manipulates the multifaceted nature of warfare. Their success was a product of foresight, psychological insight, adaptability, and a precise application of force elements that challenged traditional doctrines that favored numerical superiority. As the battle unfolded, this plan revealed its full power, turning the tide against overwhelming odds. The smaller force's ability to control the tempo of engagement, exploit enemy mistakes, and maintain iron discipline throughout the fight exhibited a level of strategic genius that remains a landmark in military history. The dome broke with an eerie quiet as the two vastly unequal armies faced each other on a rugged expanse chosen by the smaller force for its defensive advantages. The air was thick with tension, the calm before a storm that would shake the very foundations of military reasoning. For the 500 men, every moment pulsated with the gravity of their cause. For the 10,000, confidence, borderline arrogance coursed through their ranks, convinced that sheer numbers would seal an easy victory. As the larger army advanced, the initial clashes unfolded with brutal intensity. The narrow terrain forced the massive formation into a compressed front, negating their ability to maneuver freely or deploy their considerable firepower advantage. The smaller force, stationed strategically behind natural barriers and fortified positions, unleashed volleys with lethal precision. Their sharpshooters, well trained and deeply familiar with the terrain, targeted enemy commanders and supply lines, sowing early discord. Key moments soon escalated the drama. An ambitious cavalry charge by the larger army attempted to flank the defenders, but the smaller force anticipated this maneuver. With rapid signals and coordinated counter-movements, they struck the flanks with ambushes hidden among rocky outcrops, tearing into the enemy's cavalry and forcing a chaotic retreat. This unexpected resistance stunned the larger force, whose commander struggled to regroup and recalibrate. Communication became a critical battlefield dynamic. The smaller force's compact structure enabled swift and flexible transmission of orders, contrasting the cumbersome and slower commands filtering through the ranks of 10,000 men. This disparity allowed the defenders to adapt fluidly to unfolding threats, while the attackers' rigid hierarchy slowed their responses, amplifying frustration and uncertainty. Yet challenges abounded for the smaller defenders as well. Ammunition was limited, exhaustion creeping in under relentless attacks. As waves of enemy soldiers pressed forward, moments of vulnerability surfaced. But each crisis was met with steely resolve, as small platoons held their lines at critical choke points, buying time and space to redistribute resources. Leadership here proved crucial. Commands delivered with calm authority bolstered morale and discipline amid the storm. Amid the clashes, psychological warfare intensified. The defenders amplified cries and drumbeats, creating the illusion of reinforcements arriving, unsettling the attackers' resolve. False retreats and sudden counterattacks further eroded the larger army's confidence, breeding fatigue and doubt. Soldiers began to falter, hesitating where relentless drive had once pushed them forward. Unexpected outcomes emerged from these openings. Several elite units within the larger force, unprepared for the defenders' tactics, faltered and withdrew in disorder, creating gaps quickly exploited by rapid small force counterattacks. These ripples of disruption sowed chaos, turning what should have been a straightforward advance into a torturous slug. As the sun climbed, early victories by the smaller force kindled hope and renewed energy within their ranks. Enemy losses mounted, and the psychological edge shifted ever so slightly. The battle's drumbeat quickened, each side sensing the stakes climbing toward an inevitable crescendo. This opening phase was a crucible of tension and tactical cat-and-mouse games that set the tone for the entire engagement. The smaller force proved their strategy was not just plausible but powerful, challenging the assumption that might always prevails. Yet, with many hours and desperate confrontations still ahead, the outcome hung in a delicate balance. As the sun rose higher, bathing the battlefield in stark light, the critical moment that would forever alter the course of this epic struggle approached. The tension that had crackled through the air like an electric charge found release in a series of events that tipped the scales in favor of the 500 men, transforming an improbable stand into an unthinkable victory. It began with a decisive leadership choice. Recognizing that the prolonged engagement was slowly eroding their limited resources and morale, the commander of the smaller force made a bold call for a concentrated strike at the enemy's command center. This decision, fraught with risk, but promising great reward, was rooted in the belief that decapitating the larger army's leadership would sow confusion and disarray far more devastating than any direct assault. The strike was executed with precision and daring. Small elite units, seasoned and agile, navigated the terrain with stealth, bypassing heavily guarded fronts to reach the heart of the opposing forces. Their movement was a masterclass in coordination and timing, striking just as dawn's light began to reveal the battlefield. As chaos erupted in the command tent, with key commanders either captured or forced to flee, the larger army faltered. Emotion ran wild among both armies. For the smaller force, the success ignited a surge of adrenaline and renewed commitment. The idea that victory was now within reach galvanized every soldier, binding them tighter in their shared struggle. The air was thick with cries of determination and the pounding pulse of aggressive momentum. Conversely, the larger force descended into panic and disorder. Commands faltered, ranks broke, and the once confident tide of soldiers became a turbulent wave crashing upon itself. Some sought to rally, but others lost heart, their confidence shattered as if a dam had broken. This psychological pivotal moment underscored how fragile massive armies could be when their nerve centers were compromised. As the battle intensified, small but critical victories compounded. Counterattacks led by the smaller force targeted exposed flanks, exploiting gaps and fragmentations. The terrain, masterfully utilized earlier, now enabled ambush points where heavy casualties were inflicted. The larger army's inability to regroup effectively only hastened its unraveling. Among the troops, tales of bravery and sacrifice emerged, soldiers who ran headlong into overwhelming odds, leaders who inspired by example, and moments where raw human will turn the tide. Each of these instances added layers of drama and humanity to an already explosive climax. In this surge of momentum, strategic feints and tactical finesse continued to play their part. The smaller force used deceptive maneuvers to give the impression of reinforcements arriving, further deepening the disarray among the enemy. Every move was calculated to maximize confusion, delay counteroffensives, and preserve vital strength. The emotional intensity on both sides reached a crescendo. For the defenders, fear of annihilation transformed into a fierce hope, an almost sacred conviction in their cause. For the attackers, the mounting pressure of unexpected losses sparked desperation and disillusionment. The battle, once tipped overwhelmingly in favor of the larger force by mere numbers, was now a desperate contest of survival. As the hours unfolded, what had once seemed impossible now emerged as imminent. The smaller force, through audacity, cunning, and indomitable spirit, seized control of the battlefield's narrative. Their success in this critical phase forever changed history's course, proving that heart, strategy, and resolve could defy the mightiest odds. This turning point was more than a tactical victory, it was a profound testament to leadership, decision-making under pressure, and the unpredictable power of human courage. It remains a powerful reminder that the greatest victories are often won not by sheer strength, but by the ability to adapt, inspire, and strike decisively when all seems lost. The aftermath of the battle was as dramatic and consequential as the clash itself. The field, once a chaotic maelstrom of conflict, fell into a heavy silence, broken only by the groans of the wounded and the cries of the mourning. For the 500 men, the victory came with profound cost, numbers diminished, bodies weary, and spirits battered by the intense struggle. Yet, their morale soared, paradoxically buoyed by the improbable triumph that defied all expectations. Casualties were deep and felt keenly on both sides. The larger army, having suffered devastating losses in leadership and manpower, retreated in disarray. Their defeat was not only tactical but psychological. The crushing blow to their command structure fractured cohesion and morale. Rumors of the rout spread swiftly across camps and regions, staining the reputation of a force once seen as invincible. Within the victorious ranks, profound emotion mixed relief with grief. Survivors mourned fallen comrades but took pride in their shared sacrifice and unfathomable success. This victory was etched into their collective identity, breeding a fierce kind of pride and determination that would reverberate through future campaigns. Reputation and morale shifted on a grand scale. The smaller forces' triumph shattered conventional military doctrines that equated size with invincibility. Across Allied